everyone, it's Mashthestampede from TooStupidGamerz, and we're going to continue on finishing Game of the Year 2023 content with my solo. Gonna get to talk about all of the games and my personal opinions for the year, so let's just get into it. So this is a little bit of a weird year for me, and I know I kind of feel like we start off our Game of the Year saying that every single time, but trust me, this year was very weird for me. Essentially, I got to play a lot more games this year than I normally would because I made sure to go out of my way to play more games, and there are a lot of games that I was interested in, and yet I didn't really feel wowed by too many of the games from 2023. There were a few that I will have tons to talk about, to say, later in the video, but just in general, I didn't feel like there was a whole lot that grabbed me this year and kept my attention. Anyway, I'm not going to delay it any further. Let's get into it. Because of the situation with how weird the year was for me and how I felt like my attention was scattered, I'm gonna end up dividing the video as follows. First, we're gonna have the section where I got to play a couple of games extensively and I had a lot to say about them. This isn't really in like any kind of order. This isn't anything like best worst game, top 5, top whatever. No, it's none of that. This is just two games that I played this year. I put enough time into them that I felt like I really wanted to talk more about them, give it some attention in this video. The second section is going to be, like I said, I played a lot of different games, but I did that on purpose to make sure that I had more material for the end of the year content, and yet at the same time I didn't spend too much time with any of these games. So in section 2, it'll kind of be like a quick hits lightning round, if you will, just me talking about all these different games that I made sure to go out of my way to play, but maybe I have anywhere from 2 to 6 hours in each of them. All of these games were on my list, on my radar going into the year. And then finally we have the most important part of the video that contains the Game of the Year in addition to a couple of other categories. We'll get to that at the very end, and there will be plenty of things to talk about. But for now, we're going to get to our first category, and this first game I originally dubbed the unsurest game of 2023. I am talking about Resident Evil 4. Not the original Resident Evil 4, the remake of Resident Evil 4. I'm talking about the Resident Evil 4 remake Capcom put out this year. People are telling Capcom, don't gotta do this. We don't need a remake of Resident Evil 4. It's not time. But they did it anyway. And I played it. I streamed it. And I would say that I got maybe 20-25% of the way in the game. Maybe a little bit more than that. But there was a lot of things that were already standing out to me about it. So I came up with a couple of things just to talk about Resident Evil 4 Remake. Earlier in the year, Capcom released the remake of the granddaddy of survival horror games, Resident Evil freaking 4. It was odd. They definitely made too many changes, if you're asking me, which you're watching this video, so you is. There was something that kept compelling me to come back and continue. The gameplay was polished and was able to provide an exciting third-person shooter experience. However, let me boldly state right here and right now, this is definitely the worst version of Resident Evil 4, never to surpass the creative marvel that released in 2005. The remake isn't awful, it's just not quite right playing this in the context of what it's supposed to be building on. At times, I felt like I was playing Resident Evil 4 and it was making me happy because, hey, I'm thinking about Resident Evil 4, while other times it felt like I was on a disconnected sightseeing tour, reliving individual moments that resembled the original experience, and then taking a left turn through some alien unknown creation the next. It's like they took the important bits from Resident Evil 4 and just scattered it across a generic third-person survival horror game. Now, even though I complimented that the gameplay was good, I have to mention that I hate how this feels more like a modern survival horror game by comparison. To me, this is just Last of Us slapped with a Resident Evil 4 wallpaper. They even made the Las Plagas spawning zombies feel more like the clickers, which just bugs me. How are you gonna put clickers into Resident Evil 4? That's really messed up. Resident Evil 4 played a huge influence on Last of Us to begin with. So you've taken a great game that went on to influence another great game, and then when you're remaking that first great game, you just decided, oh, let's just do it like the second. I don't know if it's just me, but I'm getting flashbacks to the Thief remake when they basically just turned Thief into Dishonored. Also, I really despise that they put crafting into this game. In case the Last of Us comparison wasn't bad enough, here you go. Crafting wasn't in the original Resident Evil 4, and while I get that it's logical that crafting fits into a survival horror game, maybe if Resident Evil came out in this day and age, yeah, probably would have had that. It really just homogenizes this gameplay. Now, it's not Resident Evil 4 anymore, it just feels like another survival horror game that's virtually indistinguishable from other survival horror games today. So stealth takedowns are added in place of some of the cool close quarters combat from Resident Evil 4. I don't like that. The knife doesn't work the same because it breaks down over time, which is terrible for this, if you ask me. They never should have put that in. Someone must have thought that these changes to the gameplay were necessary, because that's just how survival is today. But as far as I'm concerned, this sucks the soul out of what the remake should have been. If you're going to remake Resident Evil 4, it should not have just been a modern survival horror game. And this remake just adds to the growing issue that I have with remakes as a whole. I am what can only be described as a remake pessimist, and that's because ultimately they're going to disappoint. Either remake will disappoint people by not being a one-to-one faithful recreation of the original, like me, or it's going to disappoint people that they didn't do anything to build on it, suggesting that the developer is just lazy. And at this point it's like, do we really need remakes if it's gonna always come down to this? Capcom did good with remaking Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2. They changed details about those games as well, but everything pre-Resident Evil 4 exists in a section of the series that most gamers would hate to play. If you asked a gamer to play the original Resident Evil 2, they would despise that experience. Fixed camera angles, tank controls, punishing difficulty, none of these things would sit well today, and only serve to remind the majority of us of painful parts of our childhood spent dying on the same screen over and over again. Remaking those games serves a good purpose of modernizing Resident Evil games with a huge barrier of entry. So after the initial announcement, a lot of gamers called attention to the fact that Resident Evil Code Veronica X could have actually used a remake, whereas Resident Evil 4 didn't need one. You know, Code Veronica X is a forgotten Resident Evil game in the old style. It gets very little attention. I know for a fact that it's good because I played it this year for my yearly Halloween stream on Twitch, and I really enjoyed it. That being said, it was hard to get through some parts just because of how antiquated the game was. I think if Capcom wanted to do Resident Evil fans a service, they really could have gone with a Code Veronica X remake. Unfortunately, it got ignored on the drawing board at Capcom HQ in favor of something that was no doubt a safer bet. I do hope one day we can get a remake for Code Veronica. I just worry that at this point, Capcom might not even want to be bothered because they've remade 1, 2, 3, and 4. They've also given us 0, which is a little more modern as well. So I think the chances of us getting a Code Veronica X remake, probably slim to none. For the future, I'm going to be more skeptical about two things: remakes and Capcom. At least as far as Capcom is concerned, I never even thought that could be possible with me. Apparently, I slipped up somewhere along the way because I gave a chance to this game that I really could have done without. I could not talk about 2023 in gaming and not mention Advanced Wars. I love Advanced Wars. I'm a huge fan. Within the last year, I went back and I played the original games, some of them for the first time all the way through, others most of the way through. I played them before, but now I actually got to finish them, so I love Advanced Wars. So this year we got Advanced Wars Reboot, which is another remake. It was good to see Advanced Wars, a series I love so much, getting some much needed attention. After watching the trailer, that excitement simmered down just a bit. It was undeniable that much like with the RE4 remake, it just vibed a lot different. I guess some game companies just can't take the simple route with these remakes. This one, however, had a different problem, and it was all presentation. The graphics for the gameplay itself were changed from 2D pixel art sprites to 3D models, as well as a complete fresh take on the portraits and cutscenes. I mentioned this really early on, but half of the art style in this game reminds me of something like Steven Universe, which is fine, but because of these very specific art style direction choices, I remained a little bit skeptical. I chose to get the game regardless just to support the series. Hopefully that a remake would lead to more Advance Wars titles, maybe a new Advance Wars game, or at least getting the originals re-released on Switch, which could have been fine in the first place. When it comes to this remake, they didn't need to fix what wasn't broken, and unfortunately they broke fix one of the defining aspects of Advance Wars, botching the presentation hardcore. I just don't understand that a remake of Advance Wars will come out and they couldn't keep a lot of the charm of the original Advance Wars games intact. The sprites looked really good with 2D pixel art style. It hid really small details like faces, but at the same time it kept important stuff. It just, the world was so vivid and creative and unique. It was so different. Also, it's my humble opinion that characters in Advance Wars did not need voiceover. Now, the thing is, I understand why they needed to incorporate these changes. The gameplay would be incredibly easy to transfer over, mostly untouched, so they had to justify the remake. In this case, the justification came by messing with how the game looks. As good as it is to finally have Advance Wars on the Switch, it just doesn't feel right, is what I'm saying. And playing the remake only makes me want to go back and play the originals instead. I made a little mistake in this video where at the top I mentioned that I got to play the two games in this section enough. Or a lot, or extensively, or whatever it was I said. But to be honest, I didn't really play much Advance Wars Reboot Camp. Having gotten my fill of playing the original Advance Wars games earlier last year, I didn't really want to play this game after it didn't really feel right to me, so I played maybe 10 hours and then I kind of just dropped it. I still had some fun, but I definitely was underwhelmed, and yeah, I didn't really get to play a whole lot of the reboot. It's also unnatural for me. I don't like to talk negatively about a game just because of graphics, just because of art style. I like to give everything a fair shake. But the thing is that it's so bad in this game, and it's really the only thing that's wrong with the remake. The 3D parts do not look good. They look borderline ugly and not at all up to par for what should be in a revitalization of one of the best Nintendo series of all time. You get this really dopey looking CG that looks like someone designed it in the bathroom of a game design school on their phone. Then we get high detail portraits with super fluid animations, and it gives me video game whiplash. How did no one in quality control play this remake during development and find this to be as jarring as I do? There are 3DS games that look better than the 3D parts of Advance Wars Reboot Camp. If we could just have super polished 2D sprites, none of this would take me away from the gameplay I love so much. They could have even done the game in the same art style as the 2D portraits. If they could find some way to make that work, that would at least be better. But instead, the way that they chose to go about the art style for this remake ruins the whole game for me. For the future, I would sincerely hope that they give us anything with Advance Wars that's a little more faithful to the way the old games look. My guess is that if we get anything more, either they'll make the DS game, which would be great if they do it right, or they'll just continue on expanding on the story with a brand new, never before released title. Maybe a sequel or a prequel, who knows. In this hypothetical future, I just asked the art directors to do what I did for months leading up to this game release on my stream. Spend some time with the original titles however you can. By all means, take in the glorious, silent, pixely world that Intelligent Systems created for us to adore. Notice how its beauty is in the simplistic but thriving design of the characters, soldiers, vehicles, buildings, projectiles, terrains, and everything else that makes you feel like you're taking part in a chibi-fied war. I just want everyone to know I'm still really happy that they made this game. This is a series that's incredibly important to me. I just can't help but think about the fact that if they had only done as good of a job with the art style as they did with bringing the gameplay from the original games into the remake, then I'd be singing a completely different tune. Unfortunately, they really got too crazy with the changes to the art, and to me it really was never quite the same. I recommend going to check out Advance Wars 1, 2, and the DS version. Any way you could play it, go check it out. And the Reboot Camp, if you buy it, I'm not going to fault you, but you won't really see me playing it that much. And that's all for section 1. Let's move on to the next part of my solo for Game of the Year 23, the lightning round. These are games, like I said, I really wanted to play them. I wish I could have played every single one of these games, even more, dedicated more time to them, but unfortunately, I just didn't have that time. I still wanted to talk about it, so I still made sure to go out, experience them, and here's a little something about each game. Armored Core 6. I really like it. When I was really young, my older brother gave me a burned copy of some Armored Core title. I don't know which one, I'm sorry. But outside of that, I haven't had any exposure to the series since. So now I found out there's a new Armored Core game coming out. Okay, well, let me take a look at this. This is one of the best looking games I've played this year. It's fun, it's also super punishing, but in a good way. Like, I finally found Bloodborne / Dark Souls, but for me. It took putting robots in there to get me. I only wish that I got this game earlier so I could have put more time in it. However, given the time that I was able to give to this game, it misses top billing just because I don't really feel invested in the world. All I want to do is go blow up other enemies, and the whole time some gritty voice just keeps talking to me for some reason. Then, when I don't know where to go on some of these missions, I'm just swooping around a boxed canyon and I got nothing to do and I just get bored. Let me say though, I am certain, 100%, had I gone through this game, had I finished this game, I think this could have been a real contender for Game of the Year for me. But as it stands now, very good looking game, great combat, but not a whole lot to keep me invested. Next up is Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. Funny enough, there were 2 games that came out this year that made me immediately go, oh look, it's Jet Set Radio. This one is actually a lot more similar to the Dreamcast cult hit, and boy, they don't hold back with this one. If there was ever a spiritual successor to a game that felt almost like it's a sequel or a remake, it would be this. I also really appreciate such a strong opening to a game. From go, the game motivates you when your character loses their head and then you have to get revenge on the bastard that decapitated you. That's almost like New Vegas levels of good opening. Like I said with Armored Core, I think that this would be a great contender for Game of the Year if I had more time with it, but I only got it very late into the year and maybe spent like 6 or 7 hours on it. And if I was a bigger Jet Set Radio fanboy, it wouldn't even be a question. I would have gotten it day one. This whole video would just be talking about that. To me, this is to the Jet Set Radio crowd what Bloodstained was for us Castlevania fans. I want to throw a quick shout out to Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe. This is just a re-release, remaster, collection, port, something or other. I don't know anymore with these game companies. It complements the Switch really well to have both a recently released 2D and 3D platformer from the Kirby series. Sadly, I never played the original. As this is a remake, it would be good for comparison for me to have done so, but I can't speak to as far as gameplay goes, it's a really tight platformer. The mechanic gimmick for this game is a little more down to earth. You gain a giant attack version of one of the abilities that lets you sweep an entire screen's worth of enemies and clear away a part of the landscape, which was totally awesome. Once I get some more free time, I'm definitely coming back to this title. I will gladly spend the extra time to get all the secrets, and I would strongly suggest you check this out, especially if you're a Kirby fan. Romancylvania. Oh my goodness. I feel so bad about this one. Romancylvania, if anyone remembers, is a super unique indie game that released way back at the beginning of the year. We talked about it on this channel. You can watch that right here. Unfortunately, it came out at a time when I was really busy and just didn't get around to it. I wanted to come back and play that game. I feel like I owe it to them to play the game, as it was the most exciting thing I saw at Play NYC that year. And just, I really wanted to support them. It was a super unique take on Symphony of the Night. I'm a huge Castlevania fan. I really like quirky indie games. I will definitely, I promise, this is a promise right now, I will come back to this game and play it at some point. It was just, unfortunately, in time for this video, I just couldn't make it happen. When I do play it, I will definitely be sure to tell you guys about it. Next, we have Sonic Superstars. So, as far as 2D Sonic goes, I have a soft spot for these games, given that I grew up playing Sega Genesis, especially the Sonic series. So, when a new Sonic game in the old style is announced, I'm always hoping it's done well, or at least the game is mostly enjoyable. Back in 2017, Sonic Mania set a really high bar, a bar that Superstars could not reach. But at least it wasn't that bad, as is the case with some recent Sonic releases. I think my biggest gripes with the game would be, 1, the art style is very dated. There's some glaring, jagged lines at the edges of characters and objects, at least on the Switch version. And 2, there were lots of performance issues. Again, I'm talking about the Switch version. Maybe PC was different, I wouldn't know because I played it on Switch. It is an okay Sonic game, but it definitely won't be my favorite game of the year, and I would say it's probably going to be a forgettable Sonic game for most people, even Sonic fans. It is nice to have another Sonic game in the old style to play on the Switch, so I could play it whenever I want to, but this just didn't hit as heavy as it should have. Sega, it's time. Let's get Sonic Mania 2. What are you waiting for, guys? Seriously.
What are you waiting for?
I don't know.
Moving on to the next game is Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I guess you could also call this Breath of the Wild 2. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is a very pretty game, and it handles well. That's about all I can say about Tears of the Kingdom that won't get everyone mad at me. You know, I fired it up, and in the first 2 hours, I just had the same exact experience that I did with Breath of the Wild, which just made me realize that that kind of Zelda doesn't appeal to me. I don't really like the voice acting. I feel like I'm not really doing much in this game. The world is so big that roaming from point A to point B takes too long. The stamina system is horrible for this. Weapons being breakable is not a fun gameplay mechanic. The soundtrack is soothing but makes Hyrule feel empty, etc. And God forbid you don't realize how cooking works. You don't just select cook from the inventory when you're next to fire. You have to hold the ingredient and physically drop it into the fire, but not too long, otherwise it'll get charred. And you can only do it with specific kind of fire. You want the bowl fire pits for real cooking. Anyway, what Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are video game daycare. Just go kill time, and eventually something happens. You make your real fun in the truest sandbox sense by going out and just making fun out of nothing. I'm sorry that this you go make the fun just doesn't do it for me, at least not for Zelda. As someone who enjoyed a more linear, while still somewhat open-feeling adventure game experience, when I think back to those original, amazing Zelda games, the changes to the formula here are just overboard. I don't want to think about where they'll go with Zelda from here. The next iteration will need even more innovative, industry-leading improvements. Maybe it'll just be a copy of Dreams masked as a Zelda game, and Nintendo's like, yeah, go on, make your own adventure. No, we mean from scratch this time. We ain't making River City Showdown is a game that I enjoyed. This game was legit. There's finally a 2023 remake that I could really get behind. What I love most about this game is, despite the voxel graphics and expanded features like online play, it still has the same toughness as the original. The fighting in this game controls in much the same way as it did in the NES River City Ransom, and you know what? That means they did a good job. Great remake. It looks like they really wanted to translate that old school experience into the modern era, and that's just what I like to see. My early impression, having pumped a couple hours into it, is that if you didn't get a chance to play the original River City Ransom, this might be a permanent replacement for first-timers. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't, even if you're not a huge River City Ransom fan. The game was just fun. And this next one, this game, this experience, this world-class example of a video game, whatever you want to call it. I definitely didn't have it on my bingo card. Dredge is an ambient game about the life of a humble fisherman with a hint of horror thrown into the mix. The player spends his days sailing and fishing and visiting random islands, all while picking up little fetch quests from strangers. The game doesn't waste time, it just throws you in. Now where things really get interesting is that there's a sanity meter. Time moves fast, like really fast, and your sanity is always affected by the world around you. As it gets to be night, your sanity meter comes up, and you better have a strong light or at least be close to a dock for some sleep, or you'll be in some trouble. If your sanity gets too high, the game basically sicks the hounds on you with all kinds of eerie attacks on your vessel. All these monsters start popping out from nowhere. It feels a lot like Don't Starve, and it's awesome. I wish I played this sooner. 2023's Dredge is definitely on my list of games to come back to from 2023, and I would say this is probably one game that I didn't expect to like as much as I did. So I hope you enjoyed the lightning round section and me getting to talk a little bit about Resident Evil and Advance Wars remakes, but we're going to move on to the main portion of this video, leading up to the game of the year. Once again, I have a couple of games that I want to talk about before I get there. Firstly, it's a game that when I found out that it came out this year, it was another one of those exciting moments, just like with Advance Wars with the reboot. I was stoked to find out that this was going to be on the Switch. It was playable. It is a game that, just another game that homages one of my favorite retro series of all time. It's made by an incredible publisher slash developer. Unfortunately, I would say that it's a game that I wish was better. I felt like they could have done a little bit more. I had a couple of things to say about it, and that game is Grim Guardians on the Switch. So I think that with Grim Guardians, the story and the setup is just a little weak. My best take of what's going on from the maybe 15 or so hours that I played was that 3 students, a demon, and 2 demon hunters get into a scuffle. The demon gets held back a grade and is mad at the other 2, then obtains absolute power and creates a castle that merges the human and the demon realm. And now we find ourselves in a castle that we have to fight our way from the bottom to the top to fight the final boss. It's a bit of a roundabout way of getting to the point that we have to play a game set in a castle. I can't help but think of Castlevania games that came out, and some of them also had really convoluted plot lines as to why we're going to involve a castle. I just wasn't so into the story. We're getting to the point where we have so many homages to very select retro games for good reason. Those games are important, and they did something that other games didn't do, and there were aspects of those games that just made them stand the test of time. So I have to really rein myself in when there's another game that's, hey, this is a Castlevania homage. I really have to rein myself in, because when I got Grim Guardians, I really just got it because I played it for a little bit, the gameplay seemed interesting enough, and, well, lo and behold, it was a company that I liked making a brand new game that was a Castlevania homage. That wasn't enough. There really wasn't anything in this game that was particularly amazing. I found the platforming and the gameplay to be a little frustrating at times. So as much as I was going into this like, this is going to be an amazing game, I'm going to dedicate like 3 hours a night to play more Grim Guardians because this is going to be great and I hope they make a sequel. I didn't really come away thinking that. I ended up getting a little bit frustrated with some of the elements of the game. And yeah, like I said, I thought that this was going to be something that I loved, but I'm going to place it as my game from 2023 where I wish they did better. We're going to call it that. So, Grim Guardians, still check it out if you want to. Maybe look up a review of it first, or maybe play a demo before you get a chance to, but in my personal experience, I wanted a little bit more from that game, but it failed to deliver for me on the gameplay side. Still, I love NT Creates, and I look forward to supporting them with other games that they make. Now, this is where my Game of the Year solo departs from Game of the Year solos that I've done for this channel in years past. I don't really have a strong runner-up, mostly because my focus is so scattered between so many different games. Like I said at the top of this, I felt like there was not too many games that could hold my focus for very long. One of those games was able to hold my focus a little bit longer, but I still didn't play too much of it. Actually, at some point I dropped it. I didn't really have the time to commit to it. It was just dragging out so long, but I did really like it. So if we're gonna have a runner-up this year for my solo, it's gonna be Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush is a game that I did not think I was gonna be giving money to Bethesda. I didn't think that they were ever gonna have a game of this type on their publishers list. The other game that immediately made me think of Jet Set Radio. However, when you actually start to play it, it's a lot different from Jet Set Radio, and I think that's a good thing too. Actually, the funny thing is that I thought that was bad at first, just because when I started playing the game, I was like, hey, wait a minute, I thought this was gonna be a Jet Set Radio type game. Why are we playing something that totally doesn't feel like Jet Set Radio? But the more I went along with it, the merits of Hi-Fi Rush really shined through and through, and really gave that game justification for existing. And despite the fact that I went into this expecting Jet Set Radio and not getting it, I was still really pleasantly surprised with what they did here. So to explain the way that Hi-Fi Rush works, essentially you are a boy of unknown origins, and you find yourself in this robot factory of sorts. It's difficult to explain, but you're in kind of like a utopia. Almost feels like it's a totalitarian state that you find yourself in or something. And the corporation that is building all of these robots deems that our main character is junk. He's not worth anything. So they attempt to get rid of him. Unfortunately, there's some kind of malfunction that happens, and in trying to get rid of him, they end up giving him superpowers by accident. And then you start to learn just how oppressive the world that you find yourself in is. You're trying to fight your way back and get revenge and just take down this corporation that's making life miserable for everybody. And the gameplay of it is really interesting. Like I said, it isn't actually a Jet Set Radio game. You don't get to do cool grinds on rails and stuff, but there is some platforming. You get a electric guitar made of trash that ends up being your main weapon, so it has a lot of beat 'em up elements, but they've also thrown in a huge component of music into this game. You're fighting basically on a rhythm, and as you fight on the rhythm, you get to do more damage, or you get more points. You can finish combos, you can do specific actions if you follow the rhythm along with the beat of the song, and the game has really cool ways of showing you what the beat is at. So it's almost like if you took, let's say for argument's sake, Jet Set Radio, but then the gameplay was something closer to, Crypt of the Necrodancer. Not quite as fixed, where every single movement is based on whatever the beat is, but at least the combat is hyper focused to this rhythm mechanic, and I like it. At first, it was kind of hard to get into. Maybe I'm not a great musician, I don't have like a good sense of rhythm or something, but really, after I got over that initial barrier to entry, the game just becomes so fun. It's super satisfying to pull off combos. It's super satisfying to do all these cool specials, and it really becomes a unique way of doing combat in a video game that you don't even notice anymore because it's just become second nature to you. Now, that being said, I do have a couple of nitpicks for Hi-Fi Rush. That is that jumping is very labored. I always felt like whenever I was kind of jumping around, I wasn't too confident that I was going to make it across a platform. I didn't know why it had to feel like that, the character could be a little bit more agile, but it makes moving around and jumping around feel super grounded. There were also these kind of challenges where you had to fight a mini boss, and you couldn't get past it until you went through this Elite Beat Agent style rhythm game QTE and got it right. You would usually have about 3 or 4 hits that you can take before you're killed and have to start over again. And I found myself repeating and repeating and repeating to the point that it's like, I get that the game has such a huge focus on rhythm, and I get that that's a very important part for Hi-Fi Rush, but honestly, it was defeating the fun of the game at that point. And sometimes I just didn't want to keep playing. So there are a lot of cool mechanics with Hi-Fi Rush. I just want to point out that as far as the gameplay goes, it was great. The story was great. The art style in Hi-Fi Rush is so dope. I really like that it feels like a good high-quality CG anime, and at the same time, it has all these cool like poppy effects, very cartoony. It felt like I was either watching an anime or like a great Saturday morning cartoon with a quippy one-liner spewing character that's just fun-loving and wants good for everyone. There are lots of 2023 games I would classify as, if I had played this more, it would probably be Game of the Year or runner-up, but without a doubt, Hi-Fi Rush deserves to be in my top 2, or if not first place game, just because of how different it was, how unique and appealing all of the different elements of the game were. I like that they mixed rhythm games. I like that it was kind of a hack and slash and you could upgrade your parts. I love the story, the characters, and the voiceover, and the artwork was all great. It was all there. I was actually looking at my little list that I have of all the categories we did in the very first Game of the Year video for 2023, and I was thinking to myself like, oh boy, Hi-Fi Rush is all over the place. But we'll get back to that later. Hi-Fi Rush, fantastic game. If you haven't played it now, maybe it's because you saw that and you thought, well, I'll go with Bomb Rush Cyberfunk instead, like I'm sure many people did. But no, Hi-Fi Rush deserves your time. It was a great game. What ended up happening with me was it was at a really early point in the year. I was relatively busy, had a lot going on, and I just couldn't dedicate more time to the game. I really wanted to finish the game, but it felt like the campaign was super long. Every time I felt like I had got through a session and made tons of progress, I looked at the index on the walkthrough, and I actually barely scratched the surface of this game. I never even got halfway through, but I can tell you, if I did get to the end, I would have loved it. I totally would have probably, maybe, possibly gave it Game of the Year. Who knows? So Hi-Fi Rush, strong runner-up. I'd recommend checking it out, and that's all I got to say about that. This year, we're just going to go straight through and on to the next one, which is my Game of the Year choice. A lot of games in 2023 to choose from. There was so much that I was interested in. It was one of those years where going into it, I had at least already like seven or so games that I thought, okay, this is probably going to be Game of the Year once I get it and I play it. But we're done with 2023, and my Game of the Year for 2023 is going to be Pikmin 4. Just to give a little bit of background on my experience with Pikmin, the game was very charming, but also it had like a dark side to it, you know? I love how real the game felt, and I love the emphasis on nature and building these kind of camaraderie with an alien species that, for whatever reason, chooses to help you on your mission to obtain treasure. That game, for the record, was freaking impossible. I never got around to finishing the original Pikmin. Back when we had that huge blackout that impacted most of the Northeast U.S., I was home for some reason. It may have just been summer vacation, you know. Anyway, I wasn't in school. My mom was working. My dad had come home from work, so he had already been sleeping, and I was just, you know, minding my own business. I was like in middle school at this time, playing games. Then the blackout happened, and suddenly all the power went out in the house, and my console shut off, and I had no idea why. It seemed like it was just something that happens once in a while, and the power is going to come back momentarily, but it didn't. And guess what game I was playing when that happened? It was none other than Pikmin for the GameCube. So every time I think about this game and what this game means to me, I'm so nostalgic for that time when that big blackout happened, because again, that's what I was playing, and immediately I was frustrated because I was in the middle of something, and it also made me worry if maybe my save file or my GameCube would be corrupted. Of course, I wouldn't know that for another 12 or so hours, but yeah. Whenever I think of Pikmin, it's so near and dear to me, and I can't help but think of that memory as well. Luckily, my GameCube kept working, Pikmin kept working, but yeah, that's what I think of whenever I think of Pikmin. So now we come to the point where they gave us Pikmin 1, they gave us Pikmin 2. The sequel was fantastic. I actually finished that one because it was already a little bit easier. The sequel also included multiplayer. And then we just didn't get anything from Pikmin. Nintendo went off and did their Nintendo thing, where they decided that, we have this series that's great and unique. We could totally put time and money into making a sequel, but we're just not going to do anything. So it was a very dark time that we did not get another Pikmin game until Pikmin 3 came out on the Wii U. It was a good game. It was something that made me want to get the Wii U. I don't remember if I just got a Wii U to play Pikmin 3, but I definitely eventually got Pikmin 3, and I liked it. It was good. It didn't feel quite the same as the original 2. And then some more silence. I know somewhere in there we got like a 3DS Pikmin game. They also made a mobile Pikmin game that was similar to Pokemon Go, but the series kind of went into like another dark state until 2023 when we got Pikmin 4, and guys, I gotta say, I'm absolutely blown away by this game. It was about halfway through my playthrough of Pikmin 4, something dawned on me that really set this game apart from the experience of the original Pikmin. We are not alone. As I watched the story unfold of the fearless space crew and their silly antics, and the dogs and the various creatures that they encounter and treasures, I had to pause and note that the story doesn't capture that lost in space on an alien planet fighting to survive feeling that the series opened with. Once again, Pikmin 1, incredibly hard game, and there was this oppressive feeling of you're all alone on this planet, except for these little Pikmin that come and help you fight off the big scary monsters. You don't really get that with Pikmin 4. That is completely lost on this game, because here we are actually a crew of space pilots, engineers, captains, scouts, doctors, and all sorts of other crew members, in addition to civilians that we rescue. By the end of the game, I feel like I'm in a whole little town or village or whatever you want to call it, because we've rescued so many people that we're just like a big community. Pikmin 4 just comes off a little bit different. The urgency of the story is stripped by this detail. The urgency of you need to get out in 30 days or less. The experience as a whole was made safe, and the Pikmin universe has been infected by too much cute. It's so cute. It's so cute. Look at this damn dog and how cute this damn dog is. But despite a very clear departure from what Pikmin 1 was, I think that all the way here at Pikmin 4, this is a fantastic entry into the series. There are a couple of little nitpicks. Sometimes the controls were kind of annoying. At times it felt like it was hard for me to aim Pikmin where I needed to throw them, and that kind of bugged me. It also felt kind of weird and jarring when we first got footage of this game, and it became apparent that it wasn't just going to be nature spaces, but we were actually going to have some of the maps be inside houses or on kitchen countertops. It's a moment where you feel the hand of the developer, or maybe the publisher, who knows, kind of saying, hey, we don't want to just make the exact same game. We're going to do something a little bit different here. It bugged me a little at first, but I got over it. I guess I could just come to terms with the fact that with this change, I still had a lot of cool things to do in these more human, less alien locations. It was still fun to run around and spawn a bunch of Pikmin, kill off some enemies in a sink somewhere, or try to figure out how you're supposed to get to the top of a little island in a kitchen to the countertop so you could continue on with your mission. It ended up not making as big of a deal as I thought it would. However, one thing I will say, which was weird about this detail, we never really got to the bottom of why we're in a kitchen, or a house, or a backyard. Whose house is this? Where exactly are we? I think that they fell a little short with explaining the story as to why this place features some of these things. Are people living here? I don't know why they would include houses and then not explain it. I really like the cave segments. It was a fun way to extend the days. When I was playing this game, I was super obsessive about trying to make as much progress as I could with the limited time that you have per day. So the cave segments were great, and the Dandori sections and the challenges, because you could extend your day and do even more before it was time to wrap everything up and head out. Also, it reminded me a lot of the multiplayer from Pikmin 2, so it was cool to revisit that feeling. I understand that at this point, this game is really here because of nostalgia, but I so enjoyed the multiplayer in Pikmin 2. So getting to play Pikmin style gameplay in underground cave bunkers, whatever, was just a treat. It was a treat as a Pikmin fan. And there was also something that they added to this game, the Ghost Pikmin. What they decided to do was put tower defense into Pikmin, which honestly didn't really feel like it needed to be there, but once you get a hang of those Ghost Pikmin levels, it was like quickly something that I really enjoyed doing. It became addicting to try to get as many Ghost Pikmin spawned as possible within the time limit, and then just watch them take out huge monsters that are roaming around at night. So the actual changes that they made to this game were odd at first, but totally justified by just being a great part of the overall experience of Pikmin 4. I think this is everything that you want for a sequel, or any kind of title that you're coming back to a previously established franchise. I think where the game fires on all cylinders is the gameplay and how they structure side content. Solving puzzles to open new paths and find treasures, leveling your space captain and his dog. All of this, it took one whole session for me to understand that I was going to be playing this a lot. I got so hooked on the gameplay that I didn't like leaving one area for the next area as soon as it was unlocked, because I just wanted to finish the area I was already in up to 100%. I wanted to do all of the stuff and explore it fully before continuing on. That's how hooked I was. We will never get another Pikmin 1, because Pikmin 1 is great and fantastic in its own right. But as far as sequels go, I will say that Pikmin is a series that is blessed. All the sequels do a little bit more that makes it fun and different without taking too much away from the original experience, and they all stand out on their own as fantastic games. Pikmin 4 being no exception and the latest example of this point. Ultimately, I feel like maybe I should have picked Hi-Fi Rush over Pikmin. Maybe Pikmin 4 should have been the runner-up. I was really aware of this when we started to make our categories, and I just noticed how Hi-Fi Rush was getting all of these categories. But sometimes what your game of the year comes down to isn't purely technical superiority. Instead, it comes down to the game that makes you more happy. At least that's the way that I did it this year. And even though Hi-Fi Rush was possibly, maybe, technically better, I side with nostalgia and will pick Pikmin 4 for my game of the year because it kept my interest long enough to see it through to the end, and it just gave me an overall sense of happiness that no other game from 2023 gave me. And that's gonna do it for my solo and our TooStupidGamerz Game of the Year content for 2023. We hope you enjoyed it. What I really want to drive home for this video is that for me, 2023 was a year of excess. I really spread myself thin with how many games I wanted to pick up and play, and that meant I didn't have as much time as I wanted for each one. I would like to do a little bit different for 2024. Whatever games I do pick, just really get as much time as I can. So if you're watching this MASH from 2024, I hope you pick 3 or 4 games But I still had a lot of fun with this video. I still had a lot of fun playing games for 2023. I'm going to continue to try to play as many new games as I can so we can bring you this content. So it serves as like a time capsule of what games I played and what were my opinions every year that we do this. And I want to make sure that we can continue to do this project. Anyway, that's all for me. I've talked so much that my voice is starting to go, but what are your thoughts on this video? Do you agree with my game of the year? Did you get to play Pikmin? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to also hit the like, comment, and subscribe button. We want to see you on more of these videos. We want to make sure to get the viewers involved. If you have any opinions about some of the things that I said or any of our friends said throughout Game of the Year 2023. That's why we do this. We want to get our opinions out there. We want to hear yours as well and have huge discussions about games. So once again, I'm Mashthestampede. This is for TooStupidGamerz. Thank you so much for another year, and we'll see you on the next TooStupidGamerz video. Thank you so much, and have a great time.